Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I love that it's written at Mount Sinai that the Devar Torah has to be right at the beginning of Musaf and not after the first prayer. But I guess that makes sense if people are going into learning. But thank you for waiting. I appreciate your patience. It's good to see everyone today. On August 28th, in 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke on the steps of Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. He says, "We have come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is not the time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." The words of the great Dr. King echo the words of the great Rabbi Akiva in Pirkei Avot. "If I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when?" While every moment in history is one to ask the question, if not now, when, this moment seems particularly potent. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for basic opportunity and access for his fellow African Americans, we now find ourselves in a time in which cuts are being made to public education and healthcare, gateways to opportunity for all peoples who are born into families without ready access. As Dr. King pointed out the great American creed in his I Have a Dream speech, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Today, we find ourselves in yet another time, a different time, but another time, in which we are hearing increasing political rhetoric and actions that dehumanize people. This time, often simply because they were born in a country other than this one. We are, in images that ring far too familiar to the ones in the time of Dr. King, seeing official governmental responses to peaceful protest becoming increasingly more violent. Yes, the efforts of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his fellow champions of the civil rights movement achieved a great deal of progress. And yet, we are far from a world in which, as Dr. King aspirationally quotes from our prophet Amos, justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. This historical moment is made even more difficult with Hillel's first question, "If I am not for myself, who is for me?" From the shooting in Sydney to the arson of Beth Israel congregation in Jackson, to false threats against our very own synagogue on New Year's Day, even just the past few weeks as Jews have been exhausting. We must be focused on protecting ourselves. And yet, as Hillel's teaching implies, if we are only for ourselves, what are we? What is the worth of our faith if it does not call us to attend to all those whom our God put divine effort forth to create in God's own image? Over Pesach, when we are called to live each day as if we had experienced slavery in Egypt, we are reminded of the great pains we went through to survive as people and as a people. We are reminded, too, of the importance of working towards a world in which no one has to experience that kind of slavery again. In the same breath that we devote to sustaining our own people in the present and in the future, we are obligated to fight for the humanity and the divine potential of all those in our midst. If I am not for myself, who is for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? I want to introduce a little aside that when I said this last night, I didn't share. But at Oneg last night, we were having conversations about, we see on the news of people fighting for other people, but why don't people speak out for us? And maybe it's not on the news often enough, but I've realized I need to share when we, as a congregation, get emails from people of other faith traditions and all other faith traditions, really. Those emails that we get from people of other faith traditions, or those phone calls, right, or those notes left on the door, that they are in support of us, that they are thinking about us, that they are praying for us, because those emails, those phone calls, right, those notes do come. So I need to start sharing them when they do come, because really, we are not being ignored. Now, every year, as MLK Day approaches, different aspects of his words ring particularly true. This year, hand in hand with the fierce urgency of now, I find myself drawn to a sentence of his that echoes something we have spoken about often the past few months in this space. In his famous speech, Dr. King recognizes the seeming impossibility to many in his community of not only the fight for civil rights, but also just the reality of everyday life, a life in which, he says, our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for white only, in which a colored person in Mississippi cannot vote and a colored person in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. I am not unmindful, he says, that some of you have come here out of your trials and tribulations. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. And to all of them, he issues the call, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. In Dr. King's religious tradition and in ours, we are not permitted to spend too much time in despair. We are called to recognize hardships, to recognize the impossibility of finishing the task in our lifetime, but also to, as we say, kaveh el Adonai, to hope in God. As Rabbi Tarfon, yet another sage in Pirkei Avot, teaches, we may not desist from the tasks that we are called to do. We may not succumb to the idea that a perfect world will never come. We are charged to work towards making it so, regardless of how far-fetched that reality may sometimes seem. For each of us, according to our passions, values, time, energy, and relationships, the causes we focus on and the actions we take to support them will differ. We have a room filled with people who donate, who campaign, who protest, who write, and who volunteer face-to-face with people in their various areas of need. I know here, too, that we have people who come from a legacy of leaders or a family who have devoted their lives to helping. Rabbi Nussbaum is certainly one of those people. We learn from the great Rabbi Joshua Heschel. And I know, too, that my predecessor, that Rabbi Zeleny, was involved in social action, in protest, and writing to help all those in need, not just persons, but peoples. So at Kiddush lunch today, I challenge you to ask the people at your table, how do both those who are your legacy, those teachers, those mentors, and you serve your fellow images of God? I challenge you to brainstorm together how you might answer the urgency of now with your own words and actions. Regardless of your resources, of your time and energy, there are infinite ways you can help with what you do have. Remember, too, that beyond lofty action, you have the opportunity every day to speak to and gaze at each person you encounter as someone who holds infinite worth, who has the potential to change the world, and who has a story that's all their own. Our Parashat today marks God's call to Moshe to demand Pharaoh to let his people go. Time and time again, God reminds Moshe that Pharaoh will say no, his heart will harden. The people of Israel, too, will refuse to believe that freedom is achievable. It hurts too much to consider. Time and time again, Moshe reminds God that he is aral sfatayim, that his lips are uncircumcised. He has a hard time speaking. And even so, God urges Moshe that freedom will happen. The struggle for it is Moshe's responsibility, and it's Moshe's responsibility right now. For us too, we acknowledge the difficulty and the necessity of our responsibility right now to shed complacency and despair, to take action. So we give ourselves and our God the trust to envision the kind of freedom that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. calls for. And I'll share his words, but I know that my voice certainly doesn't approach the urgency of his, but I'll share his words anyway. He calls for that freedom when he says, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. Shabbat Shalom. I would love to invite Ivan to lead us in Musaf today, and I would like to invite those who would like to study with John Wills to go into the library at this time. If you're able to do so, please rise for Musaf.